it really tested me personally and professionally because I had to trust the process and trust my skin especially. And skin is one of the last things sometimes to change. So it wasn't until about 9 months until I started noticing, oh, my acne's better. Oh, I'm not breaking out every single day. Oh, when I wash my face, my skin is smooth. Like, it took me a long time. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of She's in Sync, the podcast for women looking to have a safe transition off birth control and heal their hormones naturally. Today, I wanted to talk about my birth control breakup story because I have not talked about this really in depth since my very first real episode, which was, I've been doing the podcast for a year and a half already, which is crazy. So it's grown so much since then, and my business has grown so much since then. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I get from women that I work with is that they really value that I'm not just someone who gives them answers or tells them what to do to feel better. It's that I've been through it myself. I can't tell you how many women are like, I reached out to you because my acne looked the same way that yours did. Or, I feel like you really care because you've been there, like you've been dismissed, you've been told like everything's normal and you kept fighting, or, you struggled for years like I did. Like, it makes me feel better knowing that you've been in my exact same shoes. And so that means a lot to me because, my post-birth control hormone healing journey was very rough. It was very hard. I dealt with symptoms for over 4 years before I found my clinical mentor and went through extensive functional nutrition training and was really my own first client and guinea pig. And I talked about this on last week's podcast with my former client, Lisa, how I'm a guinea pig for everything that I do on my clients. I will not do something on my client if I have not done it on myself. And so, it means a lot when people see that and they know that I truly put my heart and soul into this. But this podcast is really to share why I do the work I do, why I'm so passionate about it, and really give you a behind the scenes look of my own hormone healing journey, because I think that it's important to be transparent about that and the ups, the downs, the highs, the lows, because this is a journey. It's not a like, okay, let's get off birth control and everything is better now. For me, that certainly wasn't the case. And it wasn't a matter of like, just wait it out 6 months for your hormones to balance. That did not work either. So that's what I want to share today. So taking you all the way back, I started birth control when I was 18 years old because I lost my period, and after several months of not having a period, my mom took me to the doctor because that's what you do, right? So I went to the doctor and they asked some preliminary questions. They're like, how, are you eating? What's your lifestyle look like? And I said, I eat really healthy. My mom confirmed this. I exercise almost every single day. They're like, okay, like that's normal for active girls to lose their period. And so they brushed it off and they basically just put me on birth control. They're like, this will get you your period back. You're going away to college anyways, so you might be sexually active. And that was that. So my mom and I asked, are there any long-term consequences of being on birth control? And they said no. Like, it seemed like this magic pill that fixed all our problems. So I just took this every single day. Bonus points, it would help with my skin because I was breaking out still. I'd always dealt with acne. Bonus points because I could have sex and not get pregnant. I did not end up having sex in college. That's not what happened. And I would get my period back. So it seemed like a win-win. So I started taking that, and, a couple weeks to a month later, I got my first quote unquote period. But it wasn't a real period. We'll talk about that. And problem solved, or so I thought. So I stayed on that for several years, for over 10 years. What was actually happening? Why did I lose my period? It was not because it was normal. It was not because I was just a healthy teenager who was active. I was secretly struggling with an undiagnosed eating disorder. So I was counting every single calorie that went into my mouth. No one knew about this. No one knew. I mean, on the outside, I was thin, but I wasn't emaciated, which is what people typically think of when, someone has an eating disorder. I can tell you from working in the eating disorder space for over 10 years that that is not the case. Eating disorders come in all shapes and sizes, and you cannot diagnose or tell if someone has an eating disorder just because of the way they look or their weight. But there is a stereotype of to have an eating disorder, you look very emaciated, you look very thin. I was very thin. Looking back, I can tell. I looked very, very thin. There were bones sticking out where they shouldn't have been. I had like no muscle. I cringe when I look back at pictures because I feel bad for myself that I thought that was healthy, but it wasn't. It was all secretive. It was very secretive. It had this healthy girl facade, right? And I was just really passionate, as I am now, about being healthy, right? And I know now that that was not healthy. That was obsessive. So I would, I would choose the lowest calorie yogurt that was on the shelf. So I remember yogurt was a big thing. So like light and fit yogurt, I was like, great, this has 50 calories versus this Chobani one has 120 because this light and fit has like artificial sugar and gums and is not yogurt. I'm going to choose that one. I was exercising every single day, sometimes for hours, multiple times a day. I never missed a workout. I was really obsessive with that. Exercise was probably one of the hardest things for me to switch because it became a part of my identity. In college, I improved my relationship with food, I would say, because I drank. I was in a sorority. I went to parties. I ate dorm food. So I just had a good time. And exercise was one of the hardest things because then I ended up teaching group fitness classes and I loved that. I did that for many years in college and grad school. And then when I first moved to Columbus and was a, big girl in the real world in my first adult job, I taught for many, many years, but it definitely became a piece of my identity. And so I was seen as like the healthy girl. And no one knew that I was actually struggling with an eating disorder. I had to come to that realization myself. So I never received formal treatment for an eating disorder because I was never formally diagnosed. But looking back, if I were to have someone like that come in my office, I would be like, yeah, girl, you have an eating disorder. It probably would have been OSFED. So this is something that is very important and why I'm very passionate about working with women because so many of the things that we're taught are healthy are working against our hormones. And so I lost my period because I was not fueling my body, because I was obsessively exercising, because I was counting calories and, very diligent about eating perfectly, that it was actually harming me. But I didn't realize that. So I thankfully, like I said, in college, it was a journey, but I healed my relationship with food. And exercise was more gradual, but I can say at this point in my life, I'm in a very healthy relationship with both of those things. Very thankful for that. And that's what inspired me to start my career as a dietitian in eating disorders. So I thought I was going to be there for my whole life. I absolutely loved it. I worked my way up to a manager role. I was there the last 2 years before I moved into private practice. And that was my passion until I was 27 years old. I was driving across town to get takeout food, and I was listening to a podcast. And the two people on the podcast were talking all about how you're not having a period on birth control. And I remember listening to that episode and just sitting there and being like, what? What the heck? My mind was blown because I thought I was having a period this entire time. That's why I was put on birth control. And whenever I went to my doctor, they would always ask, like, how's your period? Whenever I went to my OBGYN, how's your period? And this still irks me to this day because it's like you're not having a true period on birth control. So what I learned listening to that podcast on my drive across town to get takeout food is something I want to share with you now. You're not actually having a true period on birth control. It suppresses your natural hormone production. You're not ovulating, which is what a key to a period is you have to ovulate. And it's an artificial bleed because when birth control first came out, women were so like concerned or like freaked out by not bleeding that the pharmaceutical industry, the birth control industry, they created those sugar pills so that you are bleeding once a month with it, but you're not actually ovulating, therefore you're not actually having a true period. So I went all those years thinking I was having a real period when I actually wasn't. And so the podcast further went on to talk about not only that, but how birth control messes with your gut, how it can cause anxiety and mess with your mood, how it literally changes your brain, how it can make your detox pathways more sluggish or put more burden on your body. And all these little things that, okay, we're currently dog sitting. So I had to pause this podcast and let them finish their barking charade. So when one barks, the other barks, and everything makes one of them bark. So that's been fun. But what I was talking about is all these little things started to make sense. I had slowly been getting more digestive issues, like bloating, and I just thought it was like normal. I honestly, like, I had pretty good bowel movements, but I was pretty bloated, pretty gassy. But I just thought, like, I eat vegetables and fiber, and like that's what it is. My anxiety, that's the biggest thing that I didn't realize like was so bad until I worked on that. But I just was like getting more anxious and more anxious and more anxious. And I had really high, and I still do have very high functioning anxiety where it's like, I get shit done. No one can tell that I'm anxious. Like, no one can tell. I think the only person that can tell now is like Jared and myself, because we live together and I'm more open with those things, and he just knows me now more with that. But like, when we first started dating, he would have no clue. Like, and I would say even now, unless I'm vocal about it, sometimes he doesn't recognize it unless it's like I'm crying and it's really bad. But I try not to make it get to that point now. I've learned a lot over the years. But I had trouble sleeping. I would have insomnia. I remember there was like a bout of like 1 to 2 months where every night I would just be up until like 3 a.m. because of something that happened at work. And it was like a minor thing. It was like a client who we had a good relationship, but she went to a higher level of care with eating disorder treatment. And then she decided to stay with that dietitian afterward. And like that, like I took that really personally. And looking back, I'm like, wow, like why did that affect me so much? It's because my body was so stressed and depleted. And, birth control, it lowers your stress resiliency. So it's like we're always going to have stress, but like if you can't cope with the stress, that's a big deal. And so it can make little things feel like big monumental things. And so all these things started to click when I was listening to this podcast. And so it really interested me. And I went down a research rabbit hole where I read tons of books and I listened to podcasts. And I like to say that was when I unearthed the dark side of birth control, things that I had never learned. And I honestly felt really betrayed because I remember asking my doctor if there were any side effects, and they blatantly said no. And I was like, okay, but there's all this research on it of like how it impacts your entire body, your metabolism, your skin, your liver, your gut, your brain. Like, how can you tell someone that this doesn't? Any medication impacts you in some way, right? Like if you actually read a birth control pamphlet of the side effects, it like lists it out there, but like no one reads those, right? Like we should all read those things, but it's like the fine print. So after doing all this research, I made the decision to stop birth control, and I got the copper IUD, which is what I still have to this day. Because the copper IUD, it's not hormonal. And it was fine at first. And then I would say about 3 to 6 months is when everything came crashing down. But the first few months I was like, okay, phew. My biggest concern was acne coming back because, like I said, that is something I had dealt with my entire life. And it was something that birth control kind of sort of helped. I still did get breakouts, but they were, I would say, like managed. Okay. And so I was really scared that would come back. And I thought it didn't because it didn't happen right away. But then about 3 to 6 months after is when my face started blowing up and started getting really bad acne, really painful, really inflamed. Like And I was doing everything right, right? Like I was getting facials. I was doing like no pore cloggers in my topicals. I would do expensive routines recommended by estheticians and med spas. I tried elimination diets. I, like invested so much money and energy. And I have a whole podcast. It's way back in the archives, but I have a whole podcast of how I calculated up how much or how much money I spent. And it was over $10,000 trying to fix my acne in 4 years after coming off birth control. So every, you know, everything was just so cookie cutter and basically like, oh, you just have to go back on birth control. Like that's your only option. And so that was really hard and it was very tempting. I'm not going to lie. It was very tempting at certain points to potentially just be like, you know what, F it. I'm just going to get back on birth control. Like I'm just going to continue masking the symptoms, but I just couldn't. I couldn't knowing what it was doing to my body. I just couldn't because I was like, this is going to put me in the exact same position. And now I know like all the bad things it was doing to me, how it was contributing to my anxiety, how it was contributing to my gut issues, how it was actually making my skin worse, behind the scenes. And my skin was like being masked by it. So when I do stop, like I'm not going to be on birth control when I'm 70, like those things will still be there and they'll keep getting worse. And so like I said, I invested a lot of money, a lot of time. I saw lots of specialists and no one could help me. No one could help me. And at the lowest low, I remember I invested in I found someone who is in Canada. I've talked about this before, who claimed to do root cause, like functional approach to acne. So I invested in the program and I was very disappointed because they put me on a very restrictive diet and elimination diet and a cookie cutter supplement list. And they did very minimal testing. And my acne did not get better. And so I was like, I did a couple of those programs, like a couple of theirs. I did another one. Another one was good, but it was just like a self-paced course, but it didn't involve any of the testing. But that was my first, that would open my eyes to my first functional nutrition, like how acne is internal and external. And it wasn't until I found my previous mentor who I did extensive nutrition functional training with, who specializes in chronic skin conditions. I did her, it was like a business coaching / nutrition mentorship for dietitians and other nutrition professionals. So I did that. And that is what changed everything, quite honestly. So I ran functional labs in myself that I'd never been taught as a dietitian. And for the first time in years, I had answers to what was causing my acne and what was causing my anxiety. And it finally gave me hope because I was like, now I know, like I had H. pylori. I had really depleted minerals, not only from being on birth control, which depletes minerals, but also from, a history of an eating disorder for several years. My stress was, you can measure stress in things like a hair tissue mineral analysis. So it showed that I was stuck in sympathetic dominance. So I was in fight or flight all the time. And you can't heal if you're stuck in fight or flight. You just can't. And it showed like certain levels of good bacteria were tanked. I wasn't digesting my food. I had low stomach acid. The list goes on and on. My detox pathways were sluggish. So I had a lot of work to do. And so over the course of about 9 months, I went through, again, I was my first client and I went through my own protocols and I learned what worked, what didn't work, what didn't work. And it really tested me personally and professionally because I had to trust the process and trust my skin especially. And skin is one of the last things sometimes to change. So it wasn't until about 9 months until I started noticing, oh, my acne's better. Oh, I'm not breaking out every single day. Oh, when I wash my face, my skin is smooth. Like it took me a long time comparatively. And I always talk with clients. I'm like, sometimes it's going to, I always use the 10-80-10. It's like 10% of clients see major improvements in symptoms within the first, especially with skin, the first 6 months. And 80% of clients with skin, it's 6 to 12 months. Then there's the latter 10% where it takes longer than a year and sometimes multiple. So I was in that 80 to latter 10%, where it took me a while. That's not the case for everybody. And so it really taught me how to be patient, when to know when to stay the course, when to know when to pivot. And that's really taught me the power of mentorship and having a coach in your corner, because I used my colleagues who were going through the course. We were like learning ourselves. And it worked, but it was really hard because I had to trust that my body could heal. I had to trust that these protocols would work, because there was a lot of I've suffered with acne for my whole life, or I've been suffering for 4 years with these symptoms after birth control. Like, it's just never going to get better. Because you can read on Facebook groups and in Reddit threads and TikToks of here's the supplement that cured my hormonal acne after birth control, or here's a supplement that helped with my period, get my period back after birth control, or here's the diet that I follow after birth control for more energy or whatever. But it's that's not individualized to you. So that's the importance of getting functional labs and working with a provider, because then you know what your body needs, and you can avoid wasting the 4 years that I did, where I was going to conventional doctors, conventional dermatologists, being told just keep waiting it out, or go back on birth control, try Accutane, like another medication that's going to harm you. Or wasting tons of money and energy on cookie cutter protocols from other functional providers that weren't individualized to me. And so that's what really inspired me to make my practice different, is relying not only on the labs, but also personalizing protocols for people. And, really, and I have past episodes with clients that you can listen to where we talk about this of depending on the person, we can go as, I don't want to say as hard as you want, but we can go as quickly or as slowly as you want. And we can, depending on the person, there are some clients who they're and I was like this, I will do whatever it takes to get results fast. So I went heavier on the supplements and, nutrition stuff and protocols. And then there are other clients where they can't do that, or maybe financially they can't invest in a lot of supplements, and that's okay. We can do more food-based things, or go slower with protocols, or their life is just really busy. And so we go slower with things. But really having someone walking with you every step of the way and personalizing everything, and who really knows your body, your case, and can be they can be there to help you when you fall and when things get hard. That's sometimes more important than the protocols themselves or the labs themselves. So when you combine it all together, it's the whole package. And that's really the foundation that I built my business from, is to have the support and the data and the answers and the plan, the step-by-step plan of how to feel better, that no one gave me after I stopped birth control, that no one gave me. Everyone just told me, just keep waiting it out. Oh, try this supplement, get your hormones tested, take this food out. And I did all that. And still nothing changed until I ran the right labs, until I had the personalized protocol, and until I gave my body time and space to move through those protocols and that plan for it to heal. So if you are in the same boat where maybe you stopped birth control 6 months ago, or, maybe it's been a year, or maybe it's been just a couple of months, or maybe you're interested in stopping birth control. This is exactly why I created my new masterclass. So I am running a live masterclass in July, on July 29th. It's on Wednesday in the evening. And don't worry, if you can't make it live, it's going to be recorded and you'll get access to the recording link. But this is really for the woman who stopped birth control and her hormones are going crazy, okay? So maybe you are feeling anxious all the time. You are your acne has come back with a vengeance. You're missing your period. You have no clue where your period is. It's MIA. You really need help with your painful periods. This masterclass is going to give you answers, and it's going to give you way more answers than your doctor will, because we're diving deep into which functional labs to run based on your unique symptoms to uncover the root causes of your hormone symptoms that are rarely ever tested. So things like the hair tissue mineral analysis, iodine loading, GI map, functional blood labs, things that doctors aren't testing for, even a lot of functional doctors aren't testing for. How to stop wasting time, energy, and money guessing on supplements or protocols that aren't actually what you need, right? So what I was doing with the cookie cutter protocols. And I'm going to be sharing real life client case studies too. So this will show you real life client case studies of the internal imbalances that we found from the lab testing behind their post pill or post birth control symptoms, and a sneak peek into their individualized healing protocol. So I'm giving it all away in this masterclass, and it's just $47. You'll get access to it and the recording afterward as well. But registration officially opens July 13th when you're listening to this. And so this is something that you won't want to miss, because if you've been searching for answers, if you have been told just continue waiting it out, or your only option is just go on birth control or hormone replacement therapy, depending on your age, I guarantee you there are things that haven't been addressed. And that's because you haven't been given the right testing, the right plan, or the right support. And that's exactly what this masterclass is going to do. So the link to sign up is in the show notes. I hope to see you. And again, you'll get the recording if you can't come live. That's totally fine. But I hope to see some of you in there, because this is truly going to be so helpful, because I've had so many women reaching out lately who they're like, I just stopped birth control and I wish I had this information sooner. I wish I had your podcast sooner. I wish I found your Instagram sooner, because now I know I did it wrong. And I'm like, that's okay. That's okay. You can reverse engineer it like I did. Okay, so all is not lost. We just reverse engineer it after stopping birth control. So again, link to sign up in the show notes. I hope to see some of you there. And until next time, stay nourished, friends.